At the age of 81, Jimmy Page, the legendary guitarist of Led Zeppelin, made a remark that rippled through the rock music community, sending fans and critics alike into a flurry of speculation. The subject of his statement? None other than Ritchie Blackmore, the enigmatic and technically masterful guitarist behind Deep Purple and Rainbow. Both Page and Blackmore have carved their names into the granite of rock history, yet they've rarely crossed paths in public discourse. So when Page, known for his mystique and careful choice of words, opened up about Blackmore in a candid interview, it was nothing short of historic. In the interview, Page didn't just speak about Blackmore's guitar skills, he praised him in terms few expected. "If there's one guitarist who always kept me on my toes, it was Ritchie," Page said, his tone measured but resolute. His classical sensibilities, his precision. He was doing things most of us weren't even thinking about in the early 70s. For a moment, the walls that divided the Zeppelin and Purple fan bases crumbled. Page's acknowledgement was shocking, not because it was negative or inflammatory, but because it was deeply respectful and surprisingly vulnerable, an open recognition of a peer whose influence he had never publicly discussed in such glowing terms. The response caught fire online. For decades, fans had often framed Page and Blackmore as rivals in the pantheon of British rock gods. While Jimi Hendrix floated ethereally above all, Page and Blackmore were considered two sides of a thunderous coin. Page, the alchemist of blues, mysticism, and raw power. Blackmore, the technician with a temper, blending Baroque complexity with crushing riffs. The two men rarely commented on each other in interviews, and when they did, the tone was neutral, sometimes cold. The mutual silence was interpreted by fans as veiled disdain or perhaps mutual indifference. But this sudden, unprompted praise from Page challenged all those long-held assumptions. It suggested not just respect, but possibly admiration, something that shifted the cultural conversation among music historians and longtime followers. Page's statement also rekindled discussions about the different paths both musicians took in their post-peak careers. While Page all but disappeared from regular performance after the late 90s, choosing instead to work quietly behind the scenes and release archival Zeppelin material, Blackmore took an unpredictable route, abandoning hard rock in favor of Renaissance folk with Blackmore's Night. The contrast was stark. One reclined into legacy. The other rejected it entirely. "I didn't get it at the time," Page confessed, referring to Blackmore's transition to medieval-inspired music. "But now, looking back, I see it for what it was. An artist following a deeper instinct. That takes guts. He walked away from stadiums to play lutes and mandolins in castles. Who does that?" The confession added further weight to the shock. It wasn't just musical respect. It was personal reverence for Blackmore's unrelenting individualism. Music journalists, of course, dissected Page's comments with enthusiasm. Some saw it as a closing of the circle, an elder statesman tipping his hat to a contemporary often underappreciated in broader rock retrospectives. Others speculated that Page, reflecting more openly in his later years, was trying to correct a historic oversight. After all, Blackmore was one of the few guitarists of that era who could go toe-to-toe with Page in terms of both technical proficiency and compositional ambition. From the fiery solos on Highway Star to the medieval flourishes in Gates of Babylon, Blackmore's influence had permeated modern metal and progressive rock alike. Yet unlike Page, who enjoyed a mythical status due to Zeppelin's tight image control and mystique, Blackmore had alienated press, fans, and even bandmates with his erratic behavior and frequent lineup changes. Perhaps, some mused, Page's comment was a form of belated validation, offering Blackmore the recognition he rarely sought but undoubtedly deserved. The comments also sparked a flurry of reaction from musicians who had grown up idolizing both players. Steve Vai posted a thoughtful Instagram story thanking Page for giving Blackmore his flowers. Joe Bonamassa tweeted that, "Guitar gods recognizing each other is what we need more of," while Yngwie Malmsteen, who had long cited Blackmore as a major influence, simply shared a photo of the two guitarists from the early 70s, captioned, "Respect." It was as if a musical reconciliation had taken place, not between two feuding individuals, but between fan bases, generations, and critical traditions that had long compartmentalized the two men. Even Blackmore's camp released a rare statement. His Wife Candace Knight posted on the official Blackmore's Knight social media pages. Ritchie doesn't usually respond to praise, but he smiled when he heard Jimmy's words. That says everything. What made Page's comments particularly potent was that they arrived not during an anniversary or promotional cycle, but during a casual, in-depth conversation about the state of rock music today. The interviewer, a respected BBC music journalist, had simply asked Page which modern guitarist he was listening to. Page meandered through a list of names, some blues-based players, some experimental acts, before pausing and reflecting on what had come before. That's when Blackmore's name surfaced. People talk about technique now like it's something new, Page said. But Ritchie was doing sweep picking and harmonic phrasing before most of us had the vocabulary for it. He brought a compositional depth that made you stop and think, maybe I'm not pushing hard enough. That acknowledgement stunned fans because it peeled back the veil of competition and pride that had defined so much of the classic rock era, and perhaps that's what made the moment so unforgettable. It wasn't just that Jimmy Page spoke highly of Ritchie Blackmore, it was that he did so with humility. In doing so, he rewrote a chapter of rock history, one where silence had been mistaken for animosity and rivalry for disregard. The two men may never have shared a stage or even a friendly interview together, but in that brief statement, Page created a bridge between two towering legacies. Fans have long debated who was the superior guitarist, who wrote the better riffs, who changed the face of rock more permanently. Page's words offered an answer not in competition, but in mutual respect. Both were necessary, both were great, and both pushed the boundaries in ways that modern musicians continue to explore. As retrospectives and op-eds filled the music press, in the weeks following Page's comment, a renewed interest in Blackmore's work surged. Streams of early Rainbow albums jumped. YouTube videos analyzing his technique racked up views. And interestingly, several Led Zeppelin fan pages began sharing Deep Purple performances, something previously rare in tightly tribal fan communities. Some saw this as a revival of appreciation long overdue. Others took it as proof that the classic rock era still had the power to surprise. After all, if Jimmy Page at 81 could shock the world with a few heartfelt words about a fellow guitar god, then perhaps the mythic era of rock isn't as distant or fossilized as it seems. Perhaps it's still being written.